My boss tried to blackmail me, thinking I'd stay quiet. I didn't. What followed turned my entire career and his upside down. Let me tell you a little story about how my boss tried to blackmail me and how I turned the tables in a way he never saw coming. Buckle up, because this ride gets wild. I work in corporate finance at a mid-sized firm. Nothing flashy, just spreadsheets, deadlines, and coffee that tastes like sadness. I'd been at this company for about 5 years, slowly climbing the ladder, avoiding office politics as much as possible. My boss, Mark, was the kind of guy who thought being a manager meant making threats and pretending to be everyone's friend at happy hour. He wore too much cologne and had those weird motivational posters in his office like, "Hustle harder" and "Be the shark," you know the type. Mark and I were cordial, not exactly friends. He used to see me as one of the quiet ones, the type who gets stuff done, doesn't ask too many questions, and won't rock the boat, which, I guess, is how I ended up being his target. It started when I discovered some creative accounting in our quarterly reports. I wasn't even looking for it, just doing routine reconciliations, and something didn't add up. At first I thought it was an error, but the deeper I looked, the more deliberate it seemed. Revenue was being overstated by shifting expenses into later quarters. Not massive, but enough to mislead investors and inflate performance-based bonuses. The kicker? These numbers were signed off by Mark. I didn't go full-blown whistleblower right away. I gave him the benefit of the doubt, brought it up casually in a meeting like, "Hey, did you mean to push those expenses forward? Just want to be sure we're clean for audit." Mark didn't blink. He gave me this half smile and said, "Good eye. I was just optimizing the report for executive review. Don't worry about it." Okay, weird, but fine. Maybe it was just some shady but not illegal maneuvering. I backed off for a minute, but then, a week later, I got an email from him. No subject line, just a PDF attachment and a single sentence. "We should talk." Curiosity killed the cat, but I opened it anyway. The PDF was a private Slack chat log between me and a coworker, where I'd vented about how management was clueless and joked about taking a job offer from a competitor. Stuff I shouldn't have written, sure, but nothing outrageous. Still, Mark clearly meant it as a warning. When we met that afternoon in his office, he was all business. Shut the door, sat down. No small talk. "I know you're ambitious," he said, sliding the printed chat log toward me, like some wannabe mafia boss. "But you should be careful about burning bridges, especially if someone's willing to help you get to the next level." Then he hit me with it. "You're up for promotion this cycle, right? I can make that happen. Or I can make sure this ends up with HR." I sat there, stunned. This dude was trying to blackmail me over an internal chat that wasn't even that damning. "What do you want?" I asked, more out of disbelief than fear. He leaned back in his chair and smiled. "I need you to take ownership of the quarterly adjustments, sign off on them. That way, if questions come up during audit, it doesn't come back to me." Simple, right? My stomach dropped. Now I know what you're thinking. Why not go to HR? Well, our HR department is about as useful as a screen door on a submarine. They report to the same execs that Mark does, and from what I've heard, they sweep problems under the rug unless it's a PR crisis. But I'm not dumb. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just said, "Let me think about it." He smiled again. "Smart. Let me know by Friday." I didn't sleep that night. I paced my apartment thinking, is this really happening? Is this guy seriously trying to make me the fall guy for his accounting fraud? Then I remembered something. 2 years ago, I did a side project for our internal IT department, automating some budget reporting, and they gave me temporary elevated access to certain logs and databases. I'd never abused it, but I wondered, did they ever revoke it? Spoiler alert, they didn't. So like any responsible employee being blackmailed by their boss, I did some after-hours digging. Nothing illegal, just logging in and checking out what Mark had been up to. And what I found? Oh boy. Let's just say the shady accounting wasn't the only thing Mark was trying to cover up. There were emails, stupidly saved to his work account, about kickbacks from a vendor he'd hired on a contract pilot program. There were approvals for expense reimbursements that made no sense, including a hotel stay in Vegas during a week when he claimed to be working remote. Even a reimbursement for client entertainment that turned out to be dinner with a woman whose name matched someone from his Instagram. It was a goldmine. If I went down, I was dragging this guy straight to hell with me. But I didn't go scorched earth. Not yet. I needed a plan. So here's what I did. I forwarded the most incriminating emails and documentation to myself via a secure personal email. Then I reached out to someone I trusted, Julia, a senior analyst who used to work under Mark before she transferred departments. She'd left his team because of creative differences, aka she hated his guts. I invited her for coffee and asked point blank, if I had proof that Mark was cooking the books and blackmailing staff to cover it up, would you back me up? She blinked, stirred her drink, and said, hell yes. Boom. Allie secured. I told her everything, including what he was holding over my head. Julia told me she had her own stories, nothing as wild as mine, but definitely unethical pressure to fudge numbers and bury bad projections. She said she'd write a statement if needed. Now it was game time. I booked a meeting with Mark for Friday morning like he'd asked. I also set a second meeting for Friday afternoon with an outside lawyer, and another one for Monday with our internal audit team. Because if Mark wanted to play games, I was going to play chess. So there I was, Friday morning, about to walk into a meeting with the same man who tried to blackmail me. On the outside, I looked calm. On the inside, I was mentally flipping him off in 12 different languages. I'd prepped everything. Incriminating documents were stored on a USB drive and uploaded to a secure cloud folder, just in case Mark pulled any funny business. I'd also left a sealed envelope with my roommate labeled, "Open this if anything happens to me." Half joking, but also not. I knocked on his office door and walked in. Mark smiled like we were about to finalize a real estate deal. So, he said, leaning back, have you had time to think things over? Oh yeah, I said, sitting down and sliding the printed Slack messages back to him. I thought about it a lot. He arched a brow. And? I'm going to have to pass, I said, cool as a cucumber. I'm not signing off on anything that isn't accurate. His smile twitched. I don't think you understand how things work around here. Oh, I do, I said. I just don't like how you work. That's when I hit him with it. Also, I know about the kickbacks, the vendor payments, the fake reimbursements. You should have deleted your emails, Mark. Now he looked like the one who needed a glass of water. His face went pale, but to his credit, he recovered quickly. This is slander, he snapped. Is it? Because I've backed up everything. And just so you know, I've spoken to legal counsel. Oh, and I have a meeting scheduled with internal audit Monday morning. Mark stood up like he was about to lunge across the desk. You're finished here, he said. You think the execs are going to take your word over mine? I stood too. We'll see. But I'm not the only one. Julia's ready to back me up. And after what you pulled with her, I doubt she's the only one who has stories. Mark just stared at me. You could practically hear the gears grinding in his head as he realized the storm that was coming. I walked out and didn't look back. Later that afternoon, I met with the lawyer I'd contacted. She specialized in corporate whistleblower protection, and let me just say, this woman was a beast. She confirmed what I hoped. Everything Mark had done was not only unethical, but also potentially criminal. Between the financial misconduct and the attempted blackmail, I was sitting on a ticking time bomb. The lawyer advised me to go to internal audit first, then HR, not the other way around. HR might try to protect the company, but audit was required to escalate certain issues immediately, especially when fraud was involved. So Monday morning, I walked into the audit department's glass-walled conference room like a guy dropping off nuclear launch codes. I gave them a folder. In it? Every shady transaction I could find, plus a bullet point timeline of Mark's threats and my refusal to cooperate. You should have seen the expression on the audit director's face. She looked like someone had handed her a live grenade. Thank you, she said, all professional. We'll take it from here. By Wednesday, Mark was on leave. The company said it was personal reasons, but nobody bought it. Office gossip was flying faster than Outlook could keep up. I kept my head down, didn't brag, didn't gloat. But inside, I was doing a slow victory dance to Beyoncé's Survivor. I thought that was it, that I could move on. But I underestimated Mark. The following week, I got a letter in the mail from an unfamiliar law office. Mark was suing me for defamation. Yup, defamation. I immediately called my lawyer. She laughed. Not because it was funny, but because she'd seen this move before. It's a scare tactic, she said, designed to pressure you into backing off. But he doesn't have a case. You reported through the proper channels. You're protected under whistleblower laws. If anything, this strengthens your claim. Still, the stress was real. I barely slept. I kept expecting a knock on the door or some company higher up to pull me into a quiet meeting and tell me to stop making waves. But that moment never came, because instead the company launched a full-scale investigation. They brought in an external auditing firm, interviewed everyone on our team, reviewed months of financial records. It was like watching a building get slowly, methodically disassembled piece by piece. A week later, Julia messaged me. "You won't believe what I just heard. Mark's laptop was seized. Apparently, he'd been recording meetings." What? Why? Nobody knew. Maybe he thought it gave him leverage, or maybe he just had a huge ego. Either way, it backfired hard. One of the recordings captured him admitting to altering reports for optics. Another one? Him joking about how easy it is to get quiet employees to take the fall. Nice. The cherry on top? A former assistant came forward with receipts, literally, showing that Mark had used the company credit card to pay for a team-building retreat that was actually a weekend getaway with someone who, let's just say, was not on the payroll. After that, the company stopped calling it a leave of absence. They terminated Mark for cause. Translation: no severance, no recommendation, nothing. A month later, I got a call from the VP of Finance. I almost didn't pick up. I thought maybe I was next on the chopping block, but it was the opposite. "We're sorry about what happened," she said. "We'd like to offer you a promotion, senior finance manager." I accepted. Obviously. And Mark? As far as I know, he's still dealing with the fallout. His lawsuit? Quietly dropped. My lawyer sent one very pointed letter back, and never heard from him again. I'd like to say that after Mark got fired and the lawsuit fizzled out, everything went back to normal. But honestly, it didn't. Because things actually got better. First of all, let's talk about that promotion. When the VP of Finance called me in and offered the senior manager position, I almost thought it was a setup. Like some kind of test, let's see if this guy gets cocky after nuking his boss. But nope, it was real, and it came with a pay bump that made me do a double take. Like actually open the email and said out loud, "Wait, is this per year or per quarter?" It was the kind of salary that meant I no longer had to count how many times I hit snooze before calculating if I could still afford Starbucks that morning. I finally upgraded my sad old couch, got a proper espresso machine, even took my first solo vacation in years. Highly recommend Kyoto, by the way. More than the money, though, it was the respect. People in the office started seeing me differently. Not just as the quiet guy in finance, but as the one who took on Goliath and won. Colleagues I barely knew started dropping by my desk. "Hey, I heard about what happened with Mark. Just wanted to say, good on you." Some even shared their own horror stories. Times he yelled at them during meetings, made creepy comments, forced them to work late on weekends for no reason. Apparently, I wasn't the only one he had tried to manipulate. I was just the first to call his bluff and bring receipts. About a month after everything went down, I got an email from our CEO. Not even kidding. Subject line: "Let's grab coffee." I thought maybe he meant it figuratively, like one of those company-wide motivational emails. But no, he legit wanted to meet. So I said sure, and we sat down at the company cafe. He thanked me, told me that people like Mark are the reason corporate ethics policies exist, that it took guts to speak up. Then he dropped this line: "We're looking to overhaul our compliance and audit procedures. Would you be interested in leading a task force?" I blinked. Like lead it? Yep. We'll give you full autonomy. Pick your team, set your timeline. I want us to do better." Suddenly I was that guy. Not the office snitch, not the spreadsheet drone, the one people look to for change. Wild. Meanwhile, Mark basically vanished. From what I gathered through the grapevine, he tried to apply for a few roles at similar companies, but our industry's small. Word gets around fast. And when you're known as the guy who tried to blackmail your employee and commit fraud in the same fiscal quarter, yeah, recruiters tend to ghost you. Last I heard, he was consulting, which in corporate speak usually means unemployed but with a LinkedIn banner that says open to work and a motivational quote. Now, I'd be lying if I said everything was perfect after that. There were awkward moments. A few people who had sucked up to Mark suddenly got real quiet around me. One guy even asked if I wasn't worried that taking him down might make leadership paranoid. I just smiled and said, only if they've got something to hide. Personally, I felt different too. You ever stand up to someone and suddenly realize how much energy you've spent over the years not standing up to them? That was me. It was like I'd been walking around with invisible weights and finally dropped them. I started speaking up more in meetings, pushed back on unreasonable deadlines, started mentoring a couple of newer analysts who reminded me of myself 5 years ago. Smart, quiet, and unsure if it was okay to say no to bad ideas. Julia and I stayed close after all this. We now joke that we're like office war veterans. We've got this running gag where anytime something shady happens, one of us whispers, "Mark would have loved this," and the other just rolls their eyes. The coolest part? A year after the whole debacle, we hired a new compliance officer, a woman named Saira, who used to work for the SEC, real no-nonsense type. She pulled me aside on her first week and said, "I read your file, what you did. That took guts, most people wouldn't have." I shrugged and said, "I just didn't want to go down for someone else's mess." She smiled. "Well, you also saved this company a lot of legal trouble. And probably some shareholder lawsuits." She wasn't wrong. Apparently, after Mark was exposed, we dodged a massive bullet. An investor had been sniffing around and was ready to launch a private audit. If I hadn't come forward when I did, the fallout could have been way worse. So yeah. I went from nearly being blackmailed into committing fraud to being seen as the guy who saved the ship.